At Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter-in-law introduced me as the unbearable mother-in-law. Then I gave her a lesson that left everyone's jaws on the floor. The aroma of roasted turkey filled my son's house as I pulled into the driveway, my heart beating with a mixture of anxiety and hope. Always the same feeling when visiting David and Rebecca. After 15 years of their marriage, I still wondered if this time would be different. Smoothing down my navy blue dress, carefully chosen for the occasion, I took a deep breath and picked up the homemade pumpkin pie I had prepared. Pumpkin pie had been David's favorite since childhood. A small gesture to feel connected to my only son, even though in recent years, that connection had become increasingly fragile. The door opened before I could ring the doorbell. David smiled, but I noticed the tension in his eyes. "Hi, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Glad you could make it." "Thank you for inviting me, dear," I replied, trying not to show how much that "glad you could make it" sounded rehearsed, as if he were fulfilling an obligation. I handed him the pie. He examined it with a forced smile. "Rebecca already made dessert, but I'm sure we can serve both." Knowing Rebecca, I figured my pie would probably remain untouched in the kitchen, but I nodded and smiled as I always did. At 63, widowed for 10 years, I had learned the art of swallowing small hurts. The living room was full of people: Rebecca's parents, her brother with his wife, and some friends I didn't know. My grandchildren were also there, 12-year-old Emma and 9-year-old Noah, absorbed in their tablets in the corner of the room. "Grandma." Noah finally noticed my presence and ran to hug me. His small body against mine was the first genuine moment of the evening. Rebecca emerged from the kitchen, impeccable in her expensive dress, hair perfectly styled as always. Our gazes met for a moment, and she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Martha, you're here," she said, as if my presence was a surprise, despite the invitation made weeks before. "Thank you for having me, Rebecca," I replied, offering her the wine I had brought. "I hope you like it." She took the bottle, examining the label with an expression suggesting I had made some grave error in my choice. Interesting. I'll save this for a special occasion." Translation: the wine would never be opened. I tried to start a conversation with Emma, but she barely looked up from her tablet. Over the last 2 years, I had noticed how my grandchildren seemed increasingly distant, as if they had been subtly taught to keep me at arm's length. "Dinner's almost ready," announced Rebecca. "Why don't we all take our seats?" The table was beautifully decorated, that I couldn't deny. Rebecca always had a talent for creating visually perfect settings. I sat in the indicated place, at the farthest end of the table, away from David and the children. As everyone settled in, Rebecca remained standing, wine glass in hand, preparing for what seemed to be a speech. "Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone for being here this Thanksgiving," she started, her tone perfectly modulated. "It's wonderful to be surrounded by people we love." I smiled politely, trying to ignore how invisible I felt in that moment. "And for those who are meeting our family today," she continued, gesturing toward a couple I didn't know, "let me introduce everyone." She went around the table introducing each person with warm comments. "My lovely parents, John and Elaine. My brother Brian and his wonderful wife, Melissa. Our dear friends, Mark and Susan." When she came to me, there was a deliberate pause. Something in her gaze shifted, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "And this," she said with a thin smile, "is Martha, the unbearable mother-in-law." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt the blood drain from my face as all eyes turned to me. Some looked embarrassed, others curious, as if waiting for my reaction to this joke. David cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Rebecca," he muttered, but said nothing more. He didn't defend me. He didn't correct the comment. He just stared at his plate with sudden interest. It was in that moment, sitting at the Thanksgiving table, exposed and humiliated, that something broke inside me. It wasn't just the cruelty of that moment. It was the accumulation of years of small exclusions, cutting comments disguised as jokes, forgotten invitations to family events, social media photos of outings with my grandchildren that I never knew about. "Sorry, it was just a joke," Rebecca finally said, laughing lightly, as if I was overreacting with my silence. "Martha knows I adore her." I smiled mechanically, because that's what I always did. Swallowed the pain. Kept the peace. Didn't want to create problems for David. Didn't want to be the difficult mother-in-law Rebecca always accused me of being. "Of course," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. Lovely as always, Rebecca. The dinner proceeded with forced conversations. I ate little, the knot in my throat making it difficult to swallow anything. I observed how Rebecca skillfully controlled all interactions. How David seemed a shadow of the confident man I had raised. How my grandchildren barely looked at me. As the others ate and talked, a certainty grew inside me. The Martha who swallowed insults and accepted crumbs of affection had died at that table. It was time for a change. It was time to reclaim my dignity. I didn't know exactly how, but there, at that Thanksgiving table, silently humiliated in front of strangers and family members, I made a promise to myself, this would not stand. When dinner ended, I said goodbye with polite smiles and mechanical hugs. No one could have imagined the transformation that had begun inside me. Rebecca had underestimated me for the last time. This unbearable mother-in-law was about to teach a lesson that no one in that family would ever forget. The drive home from David's house was a blur. Tears threatened to spill, but I refused to let them fall. 10 miles of dark roads stretched before me as memories flooded my mind, each one sharper than the next. It hadn't always been this way. When David first introduced me to Rebecca 18 years ago, she was all smiles and charm. "I've heard so much about you, Mrs. Wilson," she had said, embracing me warmly. "David adores you." I remembered how hopeful I had been. After losing Richard to cancer, David was my only family. The prospect of gaining a daughter through marriage filled me with joy. The changes were so gradual, I barely noticed them happening. First came the subtle criticisms. "Oh, is that what you're wearing to the restaurant?" Rebecca would ask, her voice honeysweet, but eyes critical. "David mentioned you used to make meatloaf differently," she'd say, though David never complained about my cooking before. Then came the distance. Weekend visits became monthly, then only on holidays. Phone calls grew shorter. Whenever I called, David was always just heading out or in the middle of something important. I pulled into my driveway. The modest house was dark and quiet inside. I slumped onto the sofa without turning on the lights. On the mantel, photos chronicled a life that seemed increasingly foreign. David's graduation. Our family vacations. Richard and me on our 30th anniversary. The photo of Emma's birth was my favorite. In it, I was holding my newborn granddaughter, David's arm around me, all of us beaming. Rebecca had been recuperating in the hospital bed, but the camera had captured our joy. 2 weeks after that picture, the real trouble began. "Mom, Rebecca thinks it's best if you don't visit for a while. The baby needs routine." David's voice had been apologetic, but firm. When I was finally allowed to visit, Rebecca's mother was already installed in the guest room, helping out indefinitely. I opened my phone, scrolling through David's social media. There they were. Smiling family photos at the zoo, the beach, holiday gatherings. I hadn't been invited to. I spotted one from 3 months ago, family reunion weekend. The caption stung. Rebecca's entire extended family was there. I hadn't even known about it. The worst came when Noah started school. I'd offered to help with pickups, as many grandmothers do. "That's sweet, Martha," Rebecca had said, "but we've got it covered. Besides, the kids have so many activities, it would be too complicated to explain to you." Too complicated, as if I couldn't understand a simple schedule. As if I might somehow harm my own grandchildren through my incompetence. I put the phone down and finally allowed myself to cry, not just for tonight's humiliation, but for the years of systematic exclusion. The cancelled plans. The forgotten invitations. The way Rebecca would speak over me or redirect conversations when I tried to connect with David or the children. The painful truth was that I had become invisible in my own family, a ghost hovering at the edges, tolerated rather than welcomed. I walked to my desk and pulled out a small leather journal. Inside were notes I'd been keeping for years, though I'd never admitted to myself why. Dates of cancelled visits with Rebecca's excuses, screenshots of family events I'd discovered after the fact, brief accounts of comments made to undermine me. It wasn't just paranoia. The pattern was clear as day on these pages. There was the time I'd brought homemade cookies for the children, only to have Rebecca throw them away when she thought I wasn't looking. "Too much sugar," she claimed, before serving store-bought cupcakes an hour later. There was last Christmas, when my carefully chosen gifts for the children were accidentally left unopened until I'd gone home. There was the family tree project Emma had done for school, Rebecca's family meticulously represented, while I was reduced to a small circle labeled simply Grandma W. And through it all, David had slowly transformed from the loving, attentive son I raised into a distant man who couldn't meet my eyes when his wife insulted me at their dinner table. The realization hit me with startling clarity. I had been enabling this treatment for years. By smiling through the pain. By never confronting Rebecca's behavior. By accepting David's neglect. I had taught them that I would endure anything to maintain my tenuous place in their lives. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from my friend Elaine. How was Thanksgiving? I stared at the question. How could I possibly explain? Instead, I made a decision. I texted back. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I need your advice. For the first time in years, I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine. I wasn't going to silently accept my assigned role as the unwanted mother-in-law. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized the Martha who left that Thanksgiving table was not the same Martha who had arrived with a homemade pumpkin pie and desperate hope for acceptance. Rebecca wanted an unbearable mother-in-law. Perhaps it was time to show her what that really meant. She actually introduced you as the unbearable mother-in-law to everyone at the table. Elaine's voice rose in disbelief, drawing glances from nearby tables at the small cafe where we sat today. I nodded, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug. And David just sat there. Didn't say a word. Elaine had been my friend for over 30 years. We'd taught at the same elementary school until retirement, supported each other through our husbands' deaths, and shared countless coffee dates like this one. Unlike me, Elaine had a wonderful relationship with her daughter-in-law. Martha, this has gone beyond rudeness. This is emotional abuse, Elaine said firmly. You've been telling me bits and pieces for years, but hearing it all together, she shook her head. Why have you tolerated it for so long? The question hung in the air. Outside, December snow began to fall, dusting the sidewalk with white. Fear, I finally admitted. Fear of losing David completely. Fear of never seeing my grandchildren. And how often do you see them now? Elaine asked gently. The truth stung. Holidays, sometimes. Not even then. I found out they went to Disney World last spring. Emma had a dance recital I was never told about. My voice caught. Noah lost his first tooth. I saw the Facebook post. Elaine reached across the table and squeezed my hand. So you're already losing them? Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Then what do you really have to lose by standing up for yourself? Nothing. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. As I drove home, Elaine's words echoed in my mind. For years, I'd believed that maintaining peace at any cost was the only way to keep my tenuous connection to my family. But that approach had failed spectacularly. At home, I found myself standing before the hallway mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in years. When had my posture become so hunched? When had I started dressing in these muted colors that wouldn't draw attention? When had I begun to see myself through Rebecca's dismissive eyes? The phone rang, startling me. David's name flashed on the screen. Mom, his voice sounded strained. Rebecca wanted me to call. She thinks you might have misunderstood her joke yesterday. Not an apology. Not even close. Does she? I kept my voice neutral. You know how she is, her sense of humor can be different. He paused. Anyway, she feels bad if you took it the wrong way. Again, not an apology. She felt bad if I had taken it the wrong way, placing the blame squarely on me. In the past, I would have rushed to smooth things over. Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. The words nearly tumbled out automatically. Instead, I took a deep breath. How should I have taken being called unbearable in front of your entire family and friends, David? Silence stretched between us. She didn't mean it like that, he finally said, his tone defensive. How did she mean it? More silence. Mom, why are you making this difficult? It was just a joke. There it was. I was the problem. I was making this difficult by not accepting public humiliation with a smile. David, I said carefully, would you ever introduce Rebecca's mother that way? Would Rebecca find it funny if you did? That's different, he said quickly. Why? He had no answer. I've been thinking, I continued into the silence. Perhaps we should pause our usual Christmas arrangements this year. Then returned Christmas Day for dinner. The pattern was always the same, my gifts minimized, my presents tolerated, my contributions to the meal rearranged or replaced by Rebecca. What do you mean? David sounded genuinely surprised, and that, itself, was telling. The idea that I might set a boundary had never occurred to him. I think I need some time to myself this year. The words felt foreign, but right. But the kids are expecting you. It's tradition. Was it, though? A tradition implies something cherished. Our Christmas arrangement had become a performance of family unity that left me feeling more alone than if I'd stayed home. I'm sure you'll make it lovely for them, I said. Give them my love. Mom, he started, but I cut him off gently. I need to go now, David. I'll call you after the holidays. I hung up before he could protest further. My hands were shaking, but not with fear. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth without apologizing for it. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in ages. I called my old colleague Susan for dinner. Then I emailed the local community center about volunteer opportunities. I pulled out my watercolor set, dusty from disuse, and set it on the dining table. My life had narrowed to revolve around David's family, waiting for invitations that rarely came, keeping my schedule perpetually open in case I was needed, making myself small and undemanding in hopes of being included. No more. I sent a text to David before bed. I've given a lot of thought to our conversation. I love you and the children deeply, but I can no longer accept being treated as an afterthought in your lives. When you're ready to discuss this honestly, I'm here. He didn't respond. But I slept better that night than I had in years. The Martha who woke the next morning stood a little straighter. The battle ahead would be difficult. But for the first time, I understood that my dignity was worth fighting for. And I was just getting started. Christmas came and went. No calls from David. Only a terse text message on Christmas morning. Merry Christmas, Mom. The silence hurt. But it was also revealing. I had declined one invitation, set one boundary, and my son had retreated completely. January arrived with a blanket of snow and a new sense of purpose. I began meeting regularly with a therapist named Dr. Mitchell, a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in family dynamics. What you're describing is a classic control pattern, she explained during our third session. Your daughter-in-law feels threatened by your relationship with your son and grandchildren, so she systematically pushed you to the margins. But why? I asked. I've never interfered in their marriage. I've bent over backwards to accommodate her. That's precisely it, Dr. Mitchell said. The more you accommodate unreasonable behavior, the more it reinforces the idea that the behavior is acceptable. You've been trying to prove your worth by being accommodating, but to someone like Rebecca, that's seen as weakness. The word stung. But I recognized the truth. What can I do? I asked. I don't want to lose my son and grandchildren forever. You might need to be prepared for things to get worse before they get better, she warned. When you change patterns in relationships, there's often resistance. But the current pattern isn't working, Martha. You're being erased from your own family. February brought a surprise. Emma, my 12-year-old granddaughter, called me one afternoon. Grandma. Her voice was tentative. Are you mad at us? My heart clenched. Of course not, sweetheart. I could never be mad at you. Then why didn't you come for Christmas? Dad said you were busy, but you've never been busy before. The implication was clear. David had made it sound like my choice. As if I'd had better things to do than be with my family. I needed some time to think, I said carefully. Sometimes grown-ups need space to figure things out. Oh. She paused. Mom says you're being dramatic. Of course she did. Emma, do you remember what your mom called me at Thanksgiving? Another pause. The unbearable mother-in-law. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. She says stuff like that a lot when you're not around. The confirmation shouldn't have hurt, but it did. How did that make you feel when she said it? I asked gently. Bad, Emma admitted. Noah cried later. He said it was mean. My sweet Noah. At least someone had recognized the cruelty for what it was. It hurt my feelings, I said honestly. And when people hurt our feelings, sometimes we need time to heal. Will you come see us soon? I got an A on my science project. I'd love to hear all about it. Maybe we could meet for ice cream this weekend, just you and me. After hanging up, I called David. It went to voicemail, as expected. David, Emma called me. She'd like to meet for ice cream this weekend. I'd like your permission to take her on Saturday afternoon. Please let me know. He texted back an hour later. Fine. 2 p.m. 1 hour. 1 hour. 1 hour with my granddaughter, granted like a reluctant favor. Still, it was something. That Saturday, as Emma and I sat across from each other at the ice cream parlor, I was careful not to badmouth Rebecca or question Emma about home. Instead, I listened as she excitedly explained her science project on ecosystems. Mom didn't help at all, she said proudly. She said it was too messy. Well, I think it sounds wonderful, I replied. I always loved science projects when I was teaching. Emma's eyes widened. You were a teacher? Mom said you just stayed home. Another lie. I taught elementary school for 30 years, I told her. I taught 3rd grade. Your dad used to come to my classroom after school. He'd help feed the class guinea pig. Emma giggled. Dad was scared of our hamster. He made Mom clean the cage. These small glimpses into their lives, the real ones, not the polished social media versions, were precious. As our hour together drew to a close, Emma asked, "Can we do this again, Grandma?" "I'd like that very much," I said, hugging her goodbye. David was waiting in the parking lot, checking his watch. He nodded curtly as Emma bounded up to him, talking excitedly about our time together. "Emma, get in the car, please," he said, his voice tight. Once she was inside, he turned to me. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Having ice cream with my granddaughter," I replied simply. "You know what I mean. This, sudden boundary setting. The skipped Christmas. Now these one-on-one visits. Rebecca thinks you're trying to drive a wedge in our family." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm doing the opposite, David. I'm trying to preserve my relationship with my family in a way that maintains my dignity." "By rejecting us at Christmas?" "I didn't reject you. I declined one invitation, after being publicly humiliated at the previous family gathering." He looked away. "She apologized for that." "No, she didn't. She said I misunderstood." "That's not an apology." David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture reminiscent of when he was a frustrated teenager. "What do you want from me, Mom?" It was the first honest question he'd asked in years. "I want to be treated with respect," I said. "I want to be included in my grandchildren's lives. I want you to stop allowing your wife to belittle me." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand what it's like living with Rebecca." "You're right, I don't. But I do understand what it's like to be systematically pushed out of my son's life. And I won't accept it anymore." As I drove home, I realized something important. This wasn't just about standing up to Rebecca. It was about helping David see what had happened. To our relationship, and to him. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was fighting for something. Not just enduring it. March brought unexpected changes. After my ice cream date with Emma, I began receiving texts from her, little updates about school, questions about recipes, photos of art projects. Each message was a tiny bridge being rebuilt. For Noah's birthday in late March, I mailed a package with a carefully chosen gift, a model rocket kit we could build together if he was ever allowed to visit. I received no acknowledgement from David or Rebecca, but Emma sent a furtive photo of Noah holding the unwrapped gift, beaming. "He loves it," her text read. "Mom said it was too complicated, but Dad said they'd work on it." A small victory. David had contradicted Rebecca, for once. My weekly sessions with Dr. Mitchell continued. "You're making progress," she told me. "Remember, your goal isn't to win against Rebecca. It's to establish healthy boundaries and rebuild genuine connections." I nodded, though part of me still fantasized about Rebecca finally getting her comeuppance. Dr. Mitchell seemed to read my mind. "Martha, vindication might feel good momentarily, but it won't heal your family. Focus on the relationships you want to restore." April arrived, bringing with it an invitation I hadn't expected. Easter dinner at David and Rebecca's. I approached it with cautious optimism, preparing myself emotionally with techniques Dr. Mitchell had taught me. When I arrived, things felt different. David greeted me with a warmer hug than usual. The children rushed to embrace me, Noah excitedly telling me about the rocket we would build someday soon. Rebecca was civil, if not warm, her usual barbed comments notably absent. During dinner, I noticed something else. David was watching Rebecca carefully, almost studying her interactions with me. Twice, when she began to make subtle digs, he redirected the conversation. Something had shifted. After dessert, while Rebecca was in the kitchen, David asked the children to show me their new backyard playset. As we stepped outside, he lowered his voice. "Mom, can we talk later this week, alone?" My heart skipped. Of course. 3 days later, we met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. David looked tired, the circles under his eyes pronounced. "I owe you an apology," he began, staring into his coffee. "A big one." I waited, not trusting myself to speak. "After Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, I was angry with you," he continued. "I thought you were being difficult. But then I started paying attention, really paying attention." He looked up at me, his eyes troubled. "I watched how Rebecca talks about you when you're not around. How she tells the kids you're too busy to see them, when I know she's cancelled plans with you. How she rearranges your gifts or forgets to tell me when you've called." The validation, after years of gaslighting, brought tears to my eyes. "Last week," he said, voice dropping lower, "I found emails between her and her mother. They were mocking you. Planning how to keep you away from Emma's upcoming recital." He shook his head. "It was cruel, Mom. Deliberately cruel." "I've known for years, David," I said gently. He winced. "Why didn't you say something?" "I tried. So many times. But you didn't want to hear it. You always defended her." He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't want to see it. It was easier to believe you were overreacting than to admit I'd let this happen." He paused. "When did it start?" "Almost immediately after you were married," I admitted. "Small things at first. Then after Emma was born, it escalated." David's face fell. 15 years. I've let this go on for 15 years. "You were caught in the middle," I said, though part of me wanted him to feel the full weight of his failure to protect our relationship. "No," he said firmly. "I chose the easy path. I chose to believe what was convenient." The raw honesty surprised me. This was a different David than the conflict-avoidant man I'd known these past years. "What changed?" I asked. "You did," he said simply. "When you stopped accepting the treatment. When you started setting boundaries, it made me see what was happening. Then Emma came home from your ice cream date, talking about what a great teacher you were, and Rebecca snapped at her, that you were exaggerating. Something clicked. I realized I didn't recognize my own life anymore." I reached across the table and took his hand. "What are you going to do?" He squeezed my hand. "I've started therapy, alone. Not couples counseling. I need to figure out how I let this happen. How I became someone who would let his mother be treated this way." His eyes met mine, determined. "And I've told Rebecca things need to change." "She didn't take it well," he added. I could imagine. Rebecca had controlled the narrative for so long. "The kids miss you," he continued. "I miss you. I want you back in our lives, really in our lives." "I want that too," I said. "But I can't go back to how things were." "I know. I don't expect you to. I just..." He hesitated. "I need time to fix this, to fix myself." As we parted, David hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." Driving home, emotions warred within me. Hope, vindication, lingering hurt, and a new concern for my son, caught in what would surely be a difficult marital reckoning. I had wanted David to see the truth. But now that he did, the path forward remained uncertain. Rebecca wouldn't give up control easily. The confrontation I had long avoided might now be inevitable. But one thing was clear. I was no longer facing it alone. The weeks following my conversation with David were turbulent. Rebecca stopped responding to my texts about seeing the children. David would arrange visits, then call apologetically to reschedule. Something was happening in their household. A silent battle I was not privy to, but could feel rippling outward. "Give it time," Dr. Mitchell advised during our sessions. "Family systems resist change. You've disrupted a long-established pattern." In late May, an invitation arrived, Emma's spring piano recital. The cream-colored envelope, addressed in David's handwriting, felt like an olive branch. I spent extra time preparing for the event. Choosing an elegant blue dress I hadn't worn in years, I applied a touch of lipstick and studied my reflection. The woman looking back at me stood straighter, her eyes clearer and more determined than they had been in years. The school auditorium was already filling when I arrived. I spotted David saving a seat near the front, Rebecca nowhere in sight. She had a migraine, he explained as I sat beside him, the relief in his voice palpable. Noah's with her sister for the evening. Part of me felt guilty for my own sense of relief. I didn't wish Rebecca ill, but her absence meant a reprieve from tension. Emma's nervous, David said. She'll be so glad you came. When Emma took the stage, her eyes scanned the audience anxiously. When she spotted us, her small face lit up. She played beautifully, her fingers dancing across the keys with a confidence I hadn't seen in her before. After the recital, as we waited for Emma in the lobby, a woman approached us, Emma's piano teacher, Ms. Chen. "Mr. Wilson," she said warmly, then turned to me with a smile. "And you must be Martha. Emma talks about you all the time." I blinked in surprise. "She does?" "Oh yes. She tells me you were a teacher and that you've been helping her with her technique. Your exercises for hand positioning have made such a difference." I glanced at David, confused. I hadn't given Emma any piano advice. Ms. Chen continued, oblivious to my bewilderment. "And thank you for the music books you sent. Those classical adaptations are perfect for her level." David's expression darkened. "What music books?" Ms. Chen's smile faltered. "The ones Emma brought in last month. She said they were from her grandmother." Emma bounded up to us then, glowing with post-performance excitement. David hugged her, his voice carefully controlled. "You were amazing, sweetheart. Miss Chen was just telling us about some music books Grandma sent you." Emma froze, her eyes darting between us. Emma," I said gently, "I'm afraid there's some confusion. I didn't send you any music books." Her face crumpled. "I'm sorry. Mom said I couldn't take lessons anymore because they were too expensive. But I love piano, so I told Ms. Chen that the books were from you, and that you were helping me." David's jaw tightened. "Your mother said we couldn't afford lessons." Emma nodded miserably. "We should discuss this at home," David said, his voice tight. "Say goodbye to Grandma and Ms. Chen." As Emma hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Grandma." "You have nothing to be sorry for," I assured her. "I'm proud of you." Driving home, my mind whirled. Rebecca had lied to Emma about the lessons being too expensive. Why? Was it simply another way to control the family narrative, or something more? The answer came 3 days later. David called, his voice exhausted but resolute. "Mom, there's something you should know. Rebecca's been mismanaging our finances." "What do you mean?" He sighed heavily. "She told Emma we couldn't afford piano lessons, but she spent thousands on a spa weekend with her friends that same month. It's a pattern I've finally noticed. She restricts spending on things that matter to me or the kids, while indulging herself." I listened, surprised, but not shocked. Control rarely limits itself to one aspect of life. "There's more," he continued. "Remember those college funds we started for the kids when they were born? The ones you contributed to each year?" My stomach dropped. "Yes. Half the money is gone. Rebecca moved it to a personal account." The betrayal stung like a physical blow. 4 years, I'd sent checks for my grandchildren's education. Money saved from my teacher's pension, meant to give them a start in life. "David, I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize," he said firmly. "I'm the one who should have been paying attention. I'm going to fix this, Mom. All of it." 2 weeks later, David asked if the children could stay with me for the weekend. "Rebecca and I need to have some serious conversations," he explained, without the kids around. Those 3 days with Emma and Noah were precious beyond words. We baked cookies, built the rocket, played board games, and talked, really talked. About school, friends, dreams. No one monitored our conversations or cut visits short. When David came to pick them up, he looked different, unburdened somehow, despite the difficult weekend I knew he must have had. "Rebecca's moving out for a while," he said quietly as the children gathered their things. "We're going to try counseling, but I've made it clear that things have to change permanently." I nodded, understanding all he wasn't saying. Summer arrived gently. The children began visiting more regularly, sometimes with David, sometimes just on their own. Emma helped me in the garden, asking about every plant and telling me which books she was reading. Noah brought over drawings and proudly taped them to my fridge. One day, we sat under the oak tree in my backyard eating popsicles, and Emma said, "Grandma, I like coming here. It's quiet. It feels like home." I had to look away for a moment, blinking fast. David kept going to therapy. He didn't talk much about what happened with Rebecca, only that she'd moved in with her sister temporarily. They were still attending counseling, but he had made it clear that if she wanted their marriage to survive, things would need to change, for good. He told me, "I can't fix the past, but I can show my kids a better future." That meant the world. Rebecca never apologized. Not really. When she did come around, she was polite, reserved, and cautious. I didn't expect warmth from her anymore. But I also didn't feel invisible. And that was enough. Emma's recital in August was different from the one in spring. This time, she ran straight into my arms afterward, her pink glittery dress swishing around her knees. "I was thinking of you when I played the last part," she whispered. "It's your favorite song, right?" I nodded, too full to speak. Afterward, David took a picture of us together. Me, Emma, and Noah, with real smiles, real light. Then he handed me his phone. "Save this one, Mom. I want you to have it too." I saved it. I even framed it. Because in that photo, I saw not just a proud grandmother and two sweet kids. I saw a woman who had finally stood up, a son who had finally seen, and a family that, while not perfect, was finally beginning to mend. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. See you in the next one.